The Bible stands as the undisputed best-selling book in human history, a beacon of hope and comfort for billions. Yet beneath its pages of psalms and promises lies a collection of narratives so bizarre, so visceral, and so undeniably dark that they are rarely, if ever, discussed from the pulpit. We are talking about the kind of stories that never made it onto the felt boards of your childhood Sunday school class, because they don't fit the sanitized version of faith we are often sold. We are about to descend into a world where a prophet is devoured by lions, where celestial entities possess faces of agony and power, and where the dead do not always stay dead. Today, here on True Light, we are going to pull back the veil on the 7 most disturbing accounts in Scripture, ranking them from the simply strange to the absolutely nightmare-inducing. Consider this your official warning, because what we are about to explore is not for the faint of heart, and discretion is highly advised for what follows. Let us begin our descent with the first entry on our list, the inexplicable power of Elisha's bones. To understand the gravity of this event, we have to look at who Elisha was while he walked the earth. He was not just a minor figure. He was a titan of the Old Testament, the man who asked for a double portion of the spirit of Elijah and received it. His ministry was a relentless barrage of the supernatural, from multiplying oil to blinding armies, cleansing lepers, and yes, even raising the dead. But the story that lands him on this list doesn't happen during his life. It happens when he is cold, buried, and decomposing in a dark sepulchre. The setting is desperate. We are in ancient Israel, a time of political instability and fear, and an unknown family is in the middle of a funeral procession. The Bible doesn't give us the name of the man who died, nor does it tell us his background. He is simply a corpse being carried by his grieving friends. But this solemn ceremony is interrupted by sheer terror. On the horizon, the dust kicks up. It is a raiding party of Moabites. These were not diplomatic envoys. They were brutal invaders known for their swift violence in the spring of the year. The mourners are suddenly faced with a life or death choice: continue the respectful burial and risk being slaughtered, or dump the body and run for their lives. Panic takes over. In their haste to escape the approaching Moabite blades, they spy a nearby tomb and decide to cast their friend's body into it just to hide it. It was a clumsy, frantic act of survival. But the tomb they chose wasn't empty. It was the resting place of the prophet Elisha. Now, here is where the narrative shifts from a war story to a supernatural anomaly. As the fresh corpse tumbles into the darkness and makes contact with the skeletal remains of the prophet, bones that had been lying there for who knows how long, something impossible happens. The moment death touches the anointed remains, life explodes back into the body. The dead man doesn't just twitch. The scripture says he revived and stood up on his feet. Imagine the scene. You are running from an army. You throw your dead friend into a hole, and suddenly he climbs out, dusting himself off, alive and well. It is absolute madness. But we have to be careful here, because this miracle isn't a biblical endorsement for worshipping relics or visiting graveyards to seek power. No, the intent behind this bizarre event is to illustrate a profound spiritual truth that echoes into our lives today. It demonstrates that when a human life is totally surrendered to God, saturated with His Spirit, the impact of that life does not cease when the heart stops beating. Elisha's influence was so heavy, so dense with the reality of God, that even his calcium and marrow carried a residue of that power. It forces us to ask ourselves, is our faith strong enough to outlive us? Can our legacy bring life to others, even when we are no longer standing? It is a beautiful thought, but hold on to it tightly, because the beauty is about to fade as we move into far more terrifying territory. If a resurrection in a tomb surprised you, prepare yourself, because we are moving from the dusty earth to the terrifying expanse of the heavens with our next story, the creatures with 4 faces. This is not a hallucination. This is the opening chapter of the book of Ezekiel. The prophet Ezekiel is not sitting in a comfortable temple. He is an exile, sitting by the river Chebar in Babylon, a broken man in a broken nation. Suddenly, reality tears open. He describes a violent windstorm coming from the north, a massive cloud illuminated by flashing lightning, surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and out of this apocalyptic storm emerged 4 living creatures. Now forget the chubby, cute cherubs you see in Renaissance paintings or on Valentine's Day cards. Those are fiction. Biblical angels, specifically the cherubim that Ezekiel encounters, are terrifying multidimensional entities that defy physics. He describes them as having the general form of a man, but that is where the familiarity ends. Each creature possessed 4 distinct faces: the face of a human, the face of a lion on the right side, the face of an ox on the left, and the face of an eagle. 4 faces, seeing in all directions, representing dominion, strength, service, and divinity. Their wings touched one another, and they moved like lightning flashes, darting back and forth without turning. And if that wasn't enough to shatter Ezekiel's mind, beside these creatures were wheels, wheels within wheels, that were covered in eyes. These Ophanim were towering and dreadful, moving in perfect synchronization with the spirits. Ezekiel is trying to describe the indescribable using limited human language. He is seeing the mobile throne chariot of the Creator, the Merkabah. Above the heads of the creatures was an expanse sparkling like ice, and above that, a throne of sapphire, and seated on that throne was a figure that looked like a man, but was wreathed in fire and radiance. This vision was so overwhelming, so crushing in its majesty and strangeness, that Ezekiel did the only thing a sane human could do. He collapsed face down in the dirt. We often want a domesticated God, a God we can keep in a box. But this story reminds us that the God of the Bible is a consuming fire, surrounded by entities that would stop our hearts if we saw them with our natural eyes. It is awe-inspiring, yes, but it is also deeply unsettling to realize how small we are. Yet, as frightening as God's holiness is, there is something far more disturbing: the corruption of God's creation. And for that, we have to go back to the beginning, to the era before the Great Flood, for our third story, the reset of the world. This narrative is perhaps the most controversial and unsettling in all of Genesis. The text tells us that as humanity began to multiply, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. This sounds poetic until you dig into the original Hebrew and the ancient context. Who were these sons of God? While some theologians argue they were the lineage of Seth, the oldest and most disturbing interpretation, and the one backed by the ancient Book of Enoch and many early church fathers, is that these were fallen angels. We are talking about celestial beings crossing a forbidden cosmic boundary to mate with human women. The implications are horrifying. If this account is accurate, it means there was a specific time in history when the biological and spiritual barriers between heaven and earth were violated. The result of this unholy union was the Nephilim. The Bible describes them as the heroes of old, men of renown. But do not let the positive connotations fool you. These were giants, hybrid abominations that were never meant to exist. They were genetic anomalies. The Book of Enoch, a text that was widely read in Jesus' time and is even quoted in the New Testament book of Jude, goes into lurid detail, explaining that these fallen watchers didn't just corrupt human genetics, they taught humanity forbidden knowledge, sorcery, advanced weaponry, the art of seduction, and astrology. The world before the flood wasn't just wicked in a moral sense, it was corrupted on a DNA level. It was a world of monsters and violence that we can scarcely imagine. This gives us a chilling new perspective on the flood. We often view the flood as God losing his temper and destroying the world out of anger. But when you view it through the lens of the Nephilim, the flood becomes an act of salvation, a necessary quarantine. God said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever." The corruption had become absolute. The human genome itself was being overwritten by darkness. God had to wash the slate clean to preserve a remnant of pure humanity through Noah, so that one day the Messiah could be born. And here is the kicker, the part that should make you sit up in your chair. Jesus himself warned us. He said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." He wasn't just talking about people eating and drinking. He was hinting at a return to this kind of boundary-breaking chaos. Look around at our world today. We see the merging of biology and technology, the obsession with genetic modification, the quest for transhumanism, and the fascination with contact from other intelligences. Is it possible that the days of Noah are returning? Are we seeing the stage being set for another intrusion of the fallen? It is a thought that keeps you up at night. But if you think giants and hybrids are the peak of this list, you are mistaken. We still have to discuss bears tearing apart a gang of mockers, a father who makes a fatal promise to his own daughter, and a dragon waiting to consume a child. But before we get there, we have to pause and ask a fundamental question. Why are these horrors in the Bible at all? Why is this graphic content in the Bible? Why are we forced to look at scenes so dark, violent, and uncomfortable? You might be asking yourself if God condones this, or if these are just ancient fables gone wrong. But the answer is actually far more profound. God does not censor history, because he is not interested in presenting a filtered version of reality. He is interested in the truth. If the Bible only contained stories of moral perfection and sunny days, it would be a book for robots, not for broken human beings. The reason these stories remain is that they act as mirrors. We need to see that even the greatest heroes were deeply flawed people. Moses, the man who split the Red Sea and spoke face to face with the Creator, was denied entry into the Promised Land because of a single moment of anger and disobedience. David, the sweet psalmist of Israel and the man after God's own heart, was also an adulterer and a murderer who shattered his own family. The Bible refuses to use makeup. It shows the scars, the failures, and the consequences of sin in high definition, because it wants us to understand that faith does not make us immune to tragedy or error. Rather, faith makes us responsible for how we walk through them. These stories are not there to entertain us like a horror movie. They are there to wake us up, to shake us out of our apathy, and to show us that the spiritual path is dangerous, real, and serious. So, if you feel a pit in your stomach hearing these accounts, good. That means you are paying attention. And you are going to need that alertness, because the next story on our list involves a deception so subtle and a death so strange, it will make you question who you listen to. We are talking about the prophet devoured by a lion. The story takes place in the book of 1 Kings. God commands a prophet from Judah, a man whose name is never recorded, to travel to Bethel and confront the corrupt King Jeroboam, who had set up a false altar. The instructions from God were incredibly specific. Deliver the message, do not eat bread, do not drink water, and do not return by the same way you came. It was a strict test of obedience. The prophet goes, he stands up to the king with immense courage, and he even rejects the king's offer of a reward. He passes the big test with flying colors. But on his way home, the story takes a twisted turn. An old prophet who lived in Bethel chases after him. This man is not a pagan. He is a fellow prophet, an elder in the faith. He tells the younger man, I too am a prophet, just like you, and an angel told me to bring you back to my house to eat and drink. Here is the chilling part. The Bible bluntly says, but he was lying to him. Why did he lie? Was it jealousy? Was it a test? We don't know. But the man from Judah listened to the voice of a man over the voice of God. He went back, he ate, and he broke his vow. In the middle of dinner, the Spirit of God suddenly hijacked the lying prophet's voice to pronounce a death sentence on his guest. Terrified, the man leaves, and on the road, a lion leaps out and kills him. But it doesn't maul him. It doesn't drag him off. It doesn't even touch the donkey he was riding. Passers-by found a surreal scene. The prophet's body lying peacefully in the road, with the lion standing like a sentinel on one side and the donkey on the other, frozen in a tableau of divine judgment. This is deeply disturbing because it wasn't a demon that led the man astray. It was a religious leader. The lesson burns. Discernment is a matter of life and death. Just because someone claims to speak for God, just because they have a title or a platform, does not mean they are leading you to the truth. In a world full of voices, influencers, and spiritual gurus, this story warns us that if a message contradicts what God has already spoken to you, you must close your ears or the consequences could be fatal. If that story was about the danger of listening to the wrong voice, the next one is about the danger of using your voice to mock the wrong person. We have arrived at what is arguably the most infamous and criticized story in the entire Old Testament, Elisha and the 42 youths. This creates a problem for many modern readers, because on the surface, it looks like a temper tantrum with a body count. The context is vital. Elijah, the great prophet, has just been taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha has picked up his mantle and is now the head prophet of Israel. He is walking alone toward Bethel, the center of idolatry in the nation. As he climbs the road, a large group comes out to meet him. Now, most children's Bibles call them little children, painting a picture of innocent toddlers. But the Hebrew word used here is naharim, which refers to young men, teenagers, or young adults. This was a gang, and they weren't just teasing him about his hairline when they chanted, "Go up, you bald head! Go up, you bald head!" This was a specific malicious threat. By saying "go up," they were mocking the ascension of Elijah. They were essentially saying, "Why don't you vanish like your master did? Get out of here! We don't want you or your God." It was a rejection of God's authority. Elisha turns, looks them in the eye, and pronounces a curse in the name of the Lord. He doesn't call the bears, he simply releases the judgment. Immediately, 2 female bears charge out of the woods and maul 42 of them. It is bloody, it is brutal, and it is absolute. Why is this in the Bible? Because we live in a culture that treats nothing as sacred. We mock, we meme, and we ridicule everything. But this story stands as a jagged rock in the stream of history, reminding us that God is not to be trifled with. There is a line where grace ends and judgment begins. When a society collectively decides to aggressively mock the reality of God and threaten his representatives, the protection over that society lifts, and the wild beasts, whether literal or metaphorical, are released. It is a harsh pill to swallow, but a necessary one. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the loss of that fear is the beginning of destruction. Now, if you thought that was difficult to process, I need you to steel yourself, because the next narrative is heartbreaking on a level that is hard to articulate. It brings us to the book of Judges and the story of Jephthah's daughter. Jephthah was a tragic figure from the start. He was the son of a prostitute, rejected by his half-brothers and kicked out of his family home. He grew up as a hard man, leading a band of outlaws. But when the Ammonites threatened to destroy Israel, the elders came crawling back to Jephthah, begging him to lead their army. He agrees, but he is desperate for validation and victory. In a moment of adrenaline and anxiety before the battle, Jephthah makes a vow, a rash, unnecessary, transactional promise. He prays, "If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." He wanted to buy a guarantee. God gives him the victory, but God never asked for the payment. Jephthah returns home, a war hero, adrenaline pumping, expecting perhaps a sheep or a goat to wander out. Instead, the door swings open, and out dances his only child, his beloved daughter, playing timbrels and celebrating her father's return. The text says, "He tore his clothes and cried out, 'Oh no, my daughter! You have brought me down, and I am devastated. I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break.'" The silence that follows is deafening. Now, there is the intense theological debate here. Some scholars believe she was literally sacrificed on an altar, a horrific act of pagan ignorance by a man who didn't know the Torah forbidding human sacrifice. Others argue she was dedicated to the tabernacle, forced into perpetual virginity and isolation, which is why the text mourns her virginity rather than her death. But either way, Jephthah destroyed his own life and his daughter's future, because he treated God like a vending machine. He thought he had to trade something valuable to get God to work. How many of us do the same thing? We make bargains in the dark. God, if you save this marriage, I will do this. God, if you get me this job, I will give you that. This story stands as a monument to the foolishness of transactional faith. God does not want your rash promises. He wants your trust. He doesn't want you to negotiate with him. He wants you to rely on him. Jephthah's tragedy screams at us across the centuries. Do not speak quickly before God, and never think you can buy his favor. And finally, we arrive at the end, the ultimate story on our list. It is the most psychedelic, the most terrifying, and the most glorious vision in the entire canon of Scripture. We are going to the last book of the Bible, Revelation, to witness the dragon and the woman. This is not a historical event in a dusty town. This is a cosmic event that rips the curtain off the spiritual reality of our universe. In Revelation chapter 12, the Apostle John sees a sign in heaven. He sees a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She is pregnant, crying out in pain as she is about to give birth. But she is not alone. Standing before her is a great red dragon, an ancient, terrifying beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, and a tail so massive it sweeps 1/3 of the stars from the sky and flings them to the earth. The dragon is crouching, tensing its muscles, waiting for the baby to be born so he can devour it the second it takes its first breath. This image is the definition of disturbing. It is a snapshot of the war that has raged since the dawn of time. Most scholars agree the woman represents Israel and the believing community, and the child is the Messiah, Jesus. The dragon is identified clearly as Satan, that ancient serpent. This vision explains the violence of history. It explains why Herod slaughtered the babies in Bethlehem, trying to kill the Christ child. It explains the persecution of believers throughout the ages. It shows us that there is a dragon standing in front of every promise of God, waiting to eat it before it can grow. But listen to me closely. The story doesn't end with the dragon feasting. The child is snatched up to God and to his throne. The dragon loses. He is cast down. This story is on our list not just because it is weird, but because it is happening right now. You are in this story. The war is not just in the history books. It is in your mind, in your home, and in your heart. The enemy is real, and he is hungry. But the victory is also real. The dragon has been defeated by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. So there you have it, the 7 most disturbing, unsettling, and strange stories in the Bible. From reviving bones to 4-faced cherubim, from hybrid giants to ravenous bears. These stories might make us tremble, but they also remind us that we serve a God who is wild, untamable, and dangerously holy. He is not safe, as C.S. Lewis wrote, but he is good. Each of these dark narratives holds a torch to the reality of the human condition and the overwhelming power of the divine. Did we miss one that keeps you up at night? Is there a story you have read that you simply cannot wrap your head around? Let us know in the comments below, and maybe we will venture back into the dark for part 2. If this video opened your eyes to a side of the Bible you haven't seen before, make sure to subscribe to True Light and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. My name is David, broadcasting from Argentina, reminding you that no matter how dark the story gets, Jesus loves you, and I do too. Until next time, keep seeking the light.